Thank you for joining us. The webinar will begin shortly. If you have any questions, please use the Q&A section and we'll try to answer your questions in the order in which we receive them. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and welcome to today's episode of Alchemizing HR Navigating What's Next. Our topic, Navigating the C-Suite, Strategies for Hiring Top Executives. I'm Clarissa Peterson, and I'll be your host of today's session. But before we begin our webinar, I'd like to quickly share a little about our Alchemizing HR sponsor, Ethico, champions in empowering the ethics and compliance in HR industries for over 25 years. Ethico's innovative governance, risk, and compliance solutions prioritize people above all else. By automating time-consuming tasks and customizing solutions for HR professionals like us, Ethico revolutionizes the traditional product-focused approach. As a trusted partner, Ethico empowers teams and safeguards people. If you're ready to take your compliance and ethics to the next level, Ethico is here to support you. Now let's get started. As I said, my name is Clarissa Peterson. I'm a former Chief HR and Ethics Officer, and I have had the privilege of working on every continent on the planet, with the exception of Antarctica. And I don't know, I may get there one day. Never say never. I'm also the proud holder of the GPHR, the SPHR, and the leading professional in ethics and compliance certifications, and a former chair of the board of directors of HRCI. Today, I'm president and CEO of Ohana HR. Our firm works with organizations to transform them and their leaders one person at a time. Just a couple of housekeeping items before we get started. First of all, we know you get up early and stay up late to learn with us here at HRCI, and for that, we are so grateful. Don't forget to put your whereabouts in the chat so I can share that with our speakers a little later on. Also, it is important to us that Alchemizing HR be accessible to all, so we have a closed captioning service. If that's not a service you require, just click on the Show Captions button at the bottom of your screen for additional information. So now I have the pleasure of introducing today's speakers. First, we have Chris Danks. Chris is the CEO and founder of the Leadership Collective, with 20 years of experience helping organizations including Verizon Business, Vodafone, and Honeywell. Chris has partnered with numerous scale-up enterprises, especially in the technology sector, facilitating their global expansion endeavors. His expertise lies in talent attraction, management, and navigating the complexities of international business expansion. Chris thrives on understanding their present challenges and devising tailored solutions through TLC to drive them towards their objectives. Hamish Taylor is an award-winning CEO, speaker, advisor, moderator, interviewer, and occasional broadcaster. Hamish is a specialist in customer-led transformations. With a CV resume that the London Times described as taking some beating, Hamish Taylor progressed from an academic scholarships and sporting success to become a multi-award-winning CEO. His career is taking him from fast-track promotion through international consumer goods giant Procter & Gamble, consulting firm Price Waterhouse, and British Airways to become CEO of the Channel Tunnel Railway Eurostar, and then CEO of Sainsbury's Bank, all before he was 40. Today, Hamish is in huge demand from world-leading businesses and organizations, business schools, and even governments around the world. Megan Nickel. Megan is a seasoned HR professional, bringing extensive expertise in talent management and executive leadership to the table. Over her 15 years of experience in HR leadership roles, Megan has successfully navigated through multiple post-acquisition integrations and played a pivotal role in an IPO. Her strategic guidance has consistently led to tangible business successes across startups, growth stage ventures, and established organizations, primarily in the technology sector. Megan is currently completing her MBA at Royal Roads University and holds an honors HR management diploma along with a CPHR designation. So without further delay, I'm going to turn this now over to Chris Danks. Chris? Take it away.
Thanks very much for the introduction, Clarissa. Hello and welcome everyone from a very sunny Italy today. My name is Chris Danks and I'm the founder of the Leadership Collective. So very excited to be here once again. This is our sixth webinar with HRCI. Our goal as a strategic HRCI partner is to provide regular content and insights on some of the most pressing issues that HR professionals have, whilst enabling you to gain the relevant credits you need for your certification. So our aim is to be the primary resource you call upon as HR professionals to support and help you break through barriers, preventing you from realizing your goals. We are a community of HR professionals and leaders, and our community offers you 4 ways in which we can help you on a day-to-day basis. So one is our peer-to-peer events. We have a WhatsApp and a Slack channel to help you speak to peers and other HRCI members on a day-to-day basis. We offer a variety of content on a host of issues, challenges, and opportunities in the HR world that HR professionals have on a day-to-day basis. We also provide advisory services to support you in solving a variety of HR challenges as well. And also, what's very relevant to today's topic, we offer global recruitment solutions in now 66 countries, from Mexico to China to the US, Germany and beyond, across multiple industries, all delivered by our in-country experts, including, of course, a global executive recruitment team, should you have any need for an executive recruitment requirement as well. That's something that we do support. So let me jump in and tell you a little bit about today's event. So we really do have an awful lot to get through today. So firstly, Megan will kick us off by looking at the impact and significance of hiring and engaging the best leadership teams, before looking at how to craft a robust C-suite hiring process to acquire the best leadership talent. Megan's going to wrap up her session by highlighting the importance of embracing diversity for resilient leadership and looking at global hiring strategies. We then welcome Hamish back again today, who was on a previous HRCI webinar with us, who will then jump in to talk about his experience both as a C-level leader himself, hiring other leaders, and also from the perspective as a C-level candidate himself to offer you some further insights. Hamish will look specifically at the importance of hiring against cultural fit and how to measure this within your process, and we'll also talk about his experiences in engaging the best executive recruitment partner and how to assess their capabilities and manage them through the process of hiring and beyond. I will then take the hot seat myself this time, having been on this side of the fence for a few sessions now. I've had 20 years in recruitment myself, and I'll be hopefully offering you some insights into how to hire for future leaders that will be required to handle 5 generations of employees at one time, something that's never happened before, with a large focus on looking at a recent study conducted where we will analyse employee motivation and engagement and how leaders adapt to deliver performance within an organisation. Before we jump in, I want to make you aware, if you wouldn't mind popping up the QR code again on the screen that was up a moment ago. I want to make you aware of the strategies for hiring top executives workshop that we are hosting on the 26th of September, which is at 1 p.m. Eastern time. There are limited spaces, so do scan the code now to secure your spot. We'll be joined by Hamish here, Megan on the presentation today as well, alongside James Osborne, who is the founder and CEO of the Recruitment Network, to offer plenty of insights into the world of executive hiring. So the workshop itself will dive deeper into lots of different topics, look at a variety of data points, as well as helping you in an interactive setting to help you with your day-to-day hiring when it comes to executive leaders. So now let's just jump straight in, and I will hand over to Megan to kick us off.
Thank you, Chris. Good morning, everybody. It's morning for me. I'm here from Victoria, British Columbia, on the far west coast of Canada. And it's my absolute pleasure to be here with my friend Chris and my new friend Hamish and my new friend Clarissa today. We're really excited to dive into this topic. It's a big challenge for a lot of businesses. So I'll get right into it. First slide, please, Jameer. So when we think about executive hiring, we know that it's not just about filling a vacancy. It's truly about making a strategic investment in the future of our organizations. And when we bring leaders on board, they have a profound impact, of course, on the organization's direction and our long-term success. There's a couple compelling statistics here from McKinsey & Co. that tell us that 40% of Fortune 500 CEOs fail within the first 18 months of their tenure. And this underscores the complexity of high stakes executive hiring. And we're excited to walk through some strategies to help sort of convert that to be a more successful statistic. Further research shows that companies with high performing executive teams are 2.5 times more likely to be top quartile financial performers, again, highlighting the correlation between effective leadership and organizational success. So when I think about the key highlights here, I think one of the most important things that we try to align on when we're thinking about executive hiring is, what is the stage of business, the stage of growth, I should say, the stage that the business is at this time and where we're heading. And it's essential for us to consider that our organization's current stage is going to define the profile of the executive that we're trying to hire. As an example, our organization right now, I work for a technology organization that designs and manufactures semiconductor technology. And we were recently acquired by Canon, the large Japanese digital brand that we all know and love. And so we are currently in the stage of post-acquisition transformation. We're transforming from a startup project stage organization to a high volume manufacturing stage organization right now over the next few years, on a path to commercializing this technology, which is very exciting, but it comes with a lot of change, a lot of growth, a lot of transformation, of course. And so when we're thinking about hiring executives right now, which we very much are, we've got probably 3 active succession plans in our on our roadmap right now. We're really looking for designing a profile around this stage. So has an executive that we are looking to hire been there and done that in the past? Have they worked on transforming an organization post-acquisition? And so really aligning those profiles. The second key takeaway for me on this slide is really around organizing your recruitment strategy around your business goals. So making sure that before you even set out to activate your recruitment, that you've got clear corporate goals that you can articulate during the recruitment process, and a 5-year roadmap if that's possible. You want to, in my world, we ask deep questions around the hiring process around what the executive has accomplished that is relevant to what we're trying to accomplish right now over the next 5 years. Again, because it's such a time of growth for us, it's very important that we find that right fit. And the last one on this slide is leadership cohesion. And I know that Hamish is going to go into this in a little bit more detail coming up. But what's really important to us is, as we're navigating the complexities of executive hiring, is ensuring that the person that we bring on board complements our leadership team. We ensure that there's cohesion and sort of defining the ideal archetype for our organization, one that reflects our values, our culture, our strategic needs, certainly is so super important to us. So for us, as an example, at this stage in our organization, because it is in transformation, we're prioritizing things in our profile like collaboration, visionary thinking. We are very much prioritizing operational excellence at this time. And so those are all built into our job descriptions, and we certainly dive into them in the interview process as well. Next slide, please, Shamir. The next one I want to talk about here really is the process. So there's a few key highlights here when I think about the importance of a robust process in executive hiring. One is comprehensive job analysis and role definition. So when we kick off a process, one of the fundamental must-haves is conducting a comprehensive job analysis and defining the role with clarity. So that comes down to, of course, the essentials of technical requirements of the job, but also making sure that we design in that larger organizational context and the fit that we're trying to establish, as I was talking about the stage of business and the cultural fit that we're trying to establish there. So making sure that your role definition encompasses all of that and is really clear. it's so rare. I'm sure you've all felt this pain as well in the hiring process, and it becomes sort of acute at the executive level when we try to sort of define a checklist and then find sort of a unicorn candidate that ticks all of the boxes, including that strategic element and the cultural fit. So the next point I want to make is that being nimble and flexible, in addition to having clarity and role definition, is equally important. So it's a fine balance, allowing yourself to be surprised in the process of who you meet and what they can bring to your organization that might be outside of the boundaries of what you've clearly defined. I'll call it one of the wins that I've had recently in an executive hire was just that. We had a really clearly defined profile. We met this person. They didn't meet all of the boxes on the checklist, but they brought something in addition. And so we opened our mind a little bit, and we're so pleased that we did. So I encourage everyone to be, structured and nimble at the same time. The second point here is around multi-channel talent sourcing strategies. So this next must-have in our process is about leveraging multi-channel talent sourcing strategies. Today's competitive job market, sort of globalized job market, relying on a single method is not suffice for us. So we cast a wide net to find the best talent. Our talent market here on the West Coast of Canada is quite small, and so we need to cast a wider net. And so we lean on, of course, the traditional methods like job boards and whatnot, but more specifically aligning yourself to a world-class executive recruitment partner, recruitment agency, whomever that might be. Chris and I have worked together in this realm as well, is really, really important. So expanding into the leverage of these agencies and these partners can be so key. And then we also use digital methods, channels, social medias, et cetera, just to continue to build our brand and making sure that we're also a part of strategic global networks like the Leadership Collective and HRCI. And then lastly on this slide is really about, from a process perspective, is really about ensuring a rigorous assessment and evaluation method. This is a non-negotiable for us. One of the things that we often find in the executive recruitment world is the pressure of time. And I want to encourage people to think, sort of release the pressure valve and know that when you're hiring for executive level talent, you need to give yourself time. You need to give yourself months and months of runway. And sometimes we don't have the luxury of that time and we need to rush and feel a little bit more intense around the time. But if you can build in enough time so that you can do this rigorous assessment, you will benefit from it in the long term. And so what we do as an example here, some of the things that we do, of course, is in addition to the sort of initial screenings and whatnot to make sure that we're feeling like we're on the right track, we prioritize spending in-person time with our candidates, no matter where they are located across the globe. So we'll fly them out, we'll spend time with them, and just ensure that there is really that connection past the initial sort of interview connection that you get. I would say that about 70% of the time, the in-person meeting enhances the candidate connection, but there is about that 25% when you meet somebody in person that it validates that they are not your person. And so without that step, you very well could have hired someone that turns out to not be the person that you want to hire. So I really encourage that. In addition, from a rigor perspective, we do and spend time in the sort of personality fit evaluation. So I'm sure a lot of us have learned and been through a lot of these, the Myers-Briggs, the Gallup Strength Finder, the DISCs, et cetera. But we definitely leverage those as well to make sure that we are aligning what we need to the profile of our team. Next slide, please. Right, when we think about embracing diversity in leadership, we prioritize this greatly, of course, at Redland and in Canon Inc., of course, as well. So according to a Boston Consulting Group study, organizations that ensure above or have above average diversity across our leadership teams reported innovation revenue that was 19 percentage points higher than companies with below average diversity. So this, of course, clearly illustrates that it's not just a moral imperative, but really a business advantage. And so things that we do to ensure and attract and retain diverse talent. We make sure for certain that we're building an inclusive company culture as a starting point. That's baseline, that's table stakes. So this involves implementing policies and practices that promote inclusivity. We do bias training, we have flexible work arrangements. We ensure that there's open channels of communication that encourage feedback and dialogue across our organization, and make sure that we're not just driving it top down, but there's also the bottom up approach. There's all sorts of smaller things that we can do. We've got a period care program internally, and we do a lot of immigration support work for our executives and their families. So some of that really helps to demonstrate that we're building as an inclusive organization and a diverse organization as we possibly can. From a recruitment perspective, how we demonstrate this as well is making sure that we are using diverse job boards. We are intentionally partnering with organizations that focus on underrepresented groups and ensuring that our interview process is as diverse and representative as possible, as well as free from bias to the extent that's possible. So those are just some of the tactics that we use, but we understand the strategic imperative. Next slide, please. Great, and again, I'll just sort of highlight here the global strategy that we use here. So understanding the cultural nuances in leadership, more critical than ever, I would say. And in my world right now, having just been acquired by a Japanese organization, it's very much highlighted to us the cultural differences. And it's a beautiful thing to get to learn from and navigate together. You know, for instance, in some various cultures, leadership is viewed as top-down, or it's hierarchical, or there's authoritative roles. While in others, of course, it's more collaborative and consensus-driven. So really getting to know, you know, the nuances of who you're hiring from which culture in the world, and ensuring that you're clear on the culture that you're trying to build in your organization when you're hiring these executives. One of the things that we do, of course, I just mentioned that we've worked with Chris and his leadership collective, and that they do some executive recruitment as well. Chris has spent 20 years in it, is we ensure that we are connecting again to this global talent network. So leveraging our connected partners is so important to us. And then in addition to that, I think one of the most important things that we can do and that we ensure here is ensuring a smooth integration process for our executives. So really making sure that, I talked about sort of our immigration process earlier, that's at the beginning of the funnel, but making sure again that they understand the inclusivity of our culture. Ensuring that the onboarding program is extremely professional, that they're surrounded by sort of relocation support for them and their families. This really helps ensure, again, that they feel like that they're validated in their decision to start their life and work for an amazing company on a global scale. Next slide, please. Great, so just a few takeaways from me here. We talked about the strategic importance and the business case for hiring C-suite executives, and making sure that the decision is very much validated in thoughtfulness, in aligning to business objectives, and in aligning to sort of cultural expectations as well. We talked about the robust hiring process, so making sure that the key takeaway for me here is making sure that you define the role and define the archetype of who you're trying to hire, but you balance that with nimbleness, because you will be pleasantly surprised by opening your mind in an executive hiring process. Next, of course, is embracing diversity throughout. So making sure that you have an open mind to learn from diverse perspectives and from diverse profiles, and adding those to your leadership team to brighten the performance of your leadership team. Global recruitment best practices, so making sure that you partner with, I'll call it sort of the wide net, and a partner and an agency that has demonstrated success in what you're trying to accomplish. And the last thing I'll leave everybody with here is truly just to have fun. One of the best parts of my role as an HR executive that is tasked with hiring executives into our world is executive recruitment. It's absolutely a blast to meet people from across the world, to learn from the executives that we get to in the interview process, and to select the people that we think are going to take our business to the next level. So have fun with it. I'll leave you with that. And thank you so much. Hamish, Chris, over to you.
I'm not sure if we're coming straight back to me, Megan, or whether Chris was coming in first, but I'm quite happy to step in at this point and say hello. Right. Well, look, hello, everybody, and welcome to a somewhat unusually sunny Edinburgh in Scotland, which is where I am based. I won't be using some slides, you'll be pleased to hear, but there was a debate before we came on air as to whether that was because I like showing off my Concorde model in the background, or whether it really is because I'm too lazy to write any slides. I'll let you decide when you've heard me speak. Now, as you gathered, I'm not an HR professional, but I do have experience across a number of different industries, from consumer goods with Procter & Gamble, with British Airways when I moved into service businesses, and then in chief exec roles with Eurostar, where the job there was to get the French, the English, and the Belgians to work together in perfect harmony. Not an easy job, but I'm Scottish, so I could be a neutral in the middle. I'm not English or French or Belgian. And then Sainsbury's Bank, which was the world's first supermarket bank, and I was chief exec there. And that was bringing together a grocery chain, a 300-year-old bank with a 150-year-old grocery chain. And for the last 20 years or so, I've been working with organizations around the world on customer-led transformation, as Chris said. So I'll come back to a little bit about what that means later on. So yeah, my experience is both as a customer in C-suite recruitment processes, but also as a candidate when I've been recruited myself into senior roles or CEO roles. And Chris has asked me just to share some observations on both of those roles, or should I say in my case, probably learning by getting it wrong. So I'll start off with as a customer for recruitment, recruiting people in. And I picked out kind of 5 lessons that I think I picked up on the way. Number 1, I guess my biggest mistakes have always been when allowing technical capabilities to take precedence over culture fit, like Megan was talking about. You know, all the candidates presented to me, I expect from a recruitment firm, should have the technical experience to do the job. The big question is, can they do it in this environment? You know, my failures in recruiting brand managers at British Airways were because we wanted executives who understood customer centricity. But if you come from Unilever or Mars or Kellogg's or the kind of places we were looking, it's much easier to achieve this than it is in an operationally led business like BA, because in Mars and Unilever, the whole business is built around brand management and customer centricity. In an airline, it isn't. And therefore, we had people that had to be able to influence the business in a way that they'd never had to do in their previous roles. At Eurostar, picking on Megan's point about culture, you know, the ability to work across 3 nationalities was critical to success. I had one of my senior executives who had all the technical skills, but couldn't work with the French. Recipe for failure. And at Sainsbury's Bank, it was about getting bankers to understand a supermarket culture. It wasn't good enough to understand the financial service product needs of shoppers at the supermarket. They also needed to understand a shopper mentality. They're in a hurry. They want to get in and get out. They know what they want to buy. They know what aisle it's in. They don't want to spend 10 minutes having a conversation with you about a credit card offer while the ice cream's melting and the children are running up the aisle. It's just not going to happen. So just to be very clear, when I talk about culture fit, I'm not just talking about corporate values or even national cultures. I'm also talking about the ability to cope and perform in a new, very different business environment to maybe the one they had been in before. The second area is that in the same way that Megan talked about a little bit about interviewing skills, you know, you've got to be careful that really good interviewers don't get in the way of seeing the substance. Some executive candidates I've come across are also very skilled at managing upwards and convincing their bosses of their abilities. So when I'm looking at a candidate and looking for references, can you find me somebody to talk to that's worked with the candidate, or better still, has worked for the candidate? I don't just want to hear from the people they worked for. I want to hear from the people that had real experience, not just when they were managing upwards. Third one I picked out was, I guess, more for those of you that are You have really understood two things: me, my personality and my style, if I'm going to be this person's supervisor. And secondly, my world. What am I trying to achieve? And what are the success factors and challenges in getting there that I'm facing? That way, you stand more chance of finding me the right person to support me, because it's my personal brand that's at risk here as well. Fourthly, I want to know that you'll assist me with the onboarding and integration task. Again, something Megan mentioned. Success is not when you find me a candidate, but when the person is still there a year later and motoring. So I'd like to know that I have your ongoing support. Please don't just take the money and run. Help me after the person has come into the business as well. And then lastly, on this section, I picked out challenge. Please challenge me. Don't just bring me candidates that tick all of the boxes. If I want to grow my business, I need fresh thinking. And that may not come from safe candidates. I mean, I was never the safe candidate for the roles that I took on, as I'll explain in a minute or two. And even today as a speaker, I pride myself on the fact that I can do HR conferences or risk conferences or whatever, even though I'm not from that background, because I have an audience that wanted to be challenged. Couple of thoughts. That's when I'm recruiting for myself. As a candidate, a couple of thoughts for you. The first thing for me when I was looking at joining an organization was the context and ambition of that organization, not just the role itself. In other words, the ability to do the job for which I was being hired. I remember when I was joining British Airways, they were quite shocked when I asked to come and meet the team and spend a bit of time in the organization before I accepted the role. But it was the right thing to do, because I needed to be sure that my skill sets could be applicable in there and that the culture was one that I could work in. Megan mentioned diversity earlier on. And as I say, I would not have been hired for the Eurostar or Sainsbury's bank roles by boards with a different makeup to the boards that were hiring me. I was an outsider. I wasn't from this industry. I was coming in to challenge the current way of doing things in organizations that were full of industry experts. I needed to be sure that this is what they really wanted. They weren't just paying lip service to, we want to be challenged. They actually were open to challenge and open to have somebody coming in from a different perspective. In this area as a candidate, Chris also asked me to mention like what it's like in the first 6 months, survival once you're in the door of the new organization. And apart from the usual answers like, well, make sure you listened before you act and all this sort of stuff, I look back at the most valuable help I got when I was in my first chief exec role at Eurostar. Now, to give you context, we're a business losing over $250 million a year. And I was never short of consultants knocking on my door, offering to help me. So who got in the door? Who helped me? What help did I really want? And it was those who understood me, not just my business issues. If you think about it, if you were coming to see me when I was, say, 3 months in there, my background's in brand management. So there's going to be big gaps in my knowledge, which you can maybe help me fill. I'm partly owned by the government. I've got to deal with senior government officials. Now, in every country in the world, government officials talk their own language, which isn't normal English or whatever your language is, but it's something you have to learn. I don't know that. So maybe if you've got experience, that's how you can help me. I'm new to this industry. I'm in a railway now. I used to be consumer goods and airlines. And it's my first chief executive job. You put all of those together, and those were the people that got in to help me, the ones who understood me and my challenges as much as the ones who understood the business itself. I think my main message then for HR and HR recruiters is, look, for me, success is all about understanding your customer's world, both the internal customers and the external. As Chris mentioned, I do most of my work in the area of customer-led transformations, both as a CEO when I was leading organizations that were traditionally not really customer focused, but then working with organizations across lots of industries and lots of different functions I work with as well. Clients include people like Unilever, Mars, Ernst & Young, Pfizer, Google, and many others. And who have adopted customer-led transformation. Now, customer-led transformation says that your success is not about you. It's about how you interact with the world around you. In other words, let's have a conversation about my success, not yours, if I'm your customer. And that, to me, is the key for success in recruitment of senior executives, but more importantly, for the success of HR as a whole in your relationships with the rest of the business. And it covers a number of areas, like, have you really understood your customer's world? And by that, I mean the mental journey they're going through as much as the physical journey. Expectations, because they don't judge you on what you do. They judge you on what you do relative to their expectations. Have you understood the person, not just the business issue, like my Eurostar example? Do you know your customer's customer? Who's influencing the behavior of the person you're trying to influence? And there's many more than that. So there's a bit about understanding. There's another bit of it that's all about then using that understanding to build a value proposition for the task at hand that's about their outcome, not yours. I mean, I did one recently for an HR function where I worked with an HR team about their value proposition or customer promise to the rest of the business. And they actually got the rest of the business, wrote it for them eventually. And it said, what do the rest of the business want? We want our people inspired to deliver extraordinary business and personal results. And we'll know that if we've got the right people in the right place at the right time, they're fully engaged and challenged, they're able to respond quickly with the right tools, and all of our activities are focused on the big wins. There's no mention there of appraisal systems or competence frameworks or anything like that. And then the third area within customer-led transformation is your engagement with them. Is your engagement with these people driven by your agenda or theirs? And that's partly about communication, timing, tone of voice, focus, etc. But it's also about understanding their ambition, not letting the organization get in the way, and various other things. So in summary, as I'm approaching, looking at my 12-minute slot here, as I've got about a minute and a half left. So in summary, look, for me, the secret to success in both recruitment and retention of senior executives, and for HR as a whole, is in your relationships with the rest of the business. And it's your ability to truly immerse yourself in your customer's world and use this as a basis for the value proposition you bring to them, whether those customers be the CEO, other departments, or the candidates themselves. So right, look, I'll stop my preaching now, but seriously, if any of you would like to know a bit more about customer-led transformation and how it can help in recruitment and or HR as a whole, I put a PDF document summarizing some of the key messages into the resource pack that's available after this. And I've also left my contact details on it if anybody would like to investigate the approach a bit further. So at 11 minutes and 4 seconds, so I've undergone by 55 seconds, I'm going to hand back now to Chris, who I hope is still there.
Thanks, Hamish. I'm still hiding away in the background, so really appreciate that. I'm afraid to say I don't have any Concords in the background, and I do have a virtual background and slides today, but hopefully my bit will be just as interesting and useful as Hamish's. So thank you, Hamish. So what we're going to look at today is what leaders seek or what to look for when you're seeking leaders for the future, for tomorrow. So we're looking at a specific focus on the importance of hiring leaders who can manage 5 generations of people at one time. We're also going to spend some time looking at a snapshot of a recent employee motivation survey to see what's motivating different generations at the moment. So just to start my section off, let's look at what you need to look for when leaders need the skill and the capability to manage across those 5 generations, which is something that's really never happened before. So some things will remain the same. I put a couple of points on the slides here, like defining your requirements, which Megan talked about earlier in detail, which is vitally important. Still, fundamentally won't change, just kind of going into the details about what it is you need from this person, and some of the best practices, finding a great recruitment partner that you can engage with right the way, post onboarding and so on. All those things and many more will stay similar. However, there's going to be an increasing amount of things that are going to change, or that you should change if you're looking to hire leaders for the future. So I believe that it's very strongly that it's about applying science and art to hiring, also taking into account things like culture fit that we've already touched on, but also really understanding how these generations are operating at the moment and what's making them tick to get the best out of them. The other point is leaders are across the globe now, so very geographically diverse, as are the employees themselves. So we're seeing increasingly, and we don't expect this to change, leaders to be hired in all parts of the globe as part of the same executive team, which certainly has its advantages from a diversity, from a perspective point of view. So these are some of the things that are really really changing at the moment. Next slide, please, Jamir. So why do leaders need to, really understand motivation and drive? So we know, especially the last couple of years, that, organizations have downsized somewhat, which means that every employee has more responsibility. As I mentioned, a more geodiverse workforce. Understanding motivations across the geography is also another important dynamic, where the expectations of people, not just by age category, but by geography, are very different as well. Also, there's many data points out there that suggest that employees are not disengaged, but they're not fully engaged at the moment. So I think once these parameters are understood, it gives a leader, really good chance to help optimize the performance of their organization by understanding some of these dynamics that are really coming to the fore at the moment. Next slide, please, Jamir. So we're now going to go through a multi-generational engagement survey. This is actually from the recruitment sector itself, so to leaders within recruitment, to understand how they better engage, or how to better engage, support, motivate and drive better behaviour and performance across their workforce. The survey will give you some indicators into the specific industry itself, but I'm hoping that you can transfer these broad insights into your own industry. I'm sure there'll be some nuanced differences, but it should give you some idea. There's not enough time to go through the full report, but I'm going to give you some of the key snapshot takeaways. We will go through more detail on the workshop that we mentioned earlier, coming up in September, and do a bit of a deeper dive on this. But for now, we're just going to give you kind of the headlines. Next slide, please, Jamir. So here is the 9 key components that were covered across this report that we're going to have a look at now to give you a snapshot on some of the findings. So on the next slide, please, Jamir, you'll see that the first slide looks at the results across all age groups. We're only going to focus today on 18 to 24-year-olds, and which is the Gen Z generation and the Gen X. But actually, in the full report, there's additional age categories that sit in between that we can show you data on. If you're looking across the all age groups here, remuneration and benefits one. This is the recruitment industry, which is very sales focused, so that wasn't a huge surprise. But we did find across all age groups that was still very consistent. We also found that culture, development, and content of the role have relatively high scores, meaning you as HR professionals certainly have a big role to play in aligning the HR strategy to the business strategy to really drive results. I'll just quickly mention that small QR code you see there is a different one than I showed earlier. That's to a salary and reward benchmarking workshop that we're doing in September that we mentioned on the last HRCI webinar. We do have a few slots left if you want to come in and learn more, particularly about remuneration and benefits as well. Next slide, please. Okay, so I'm sure many of you have seen a quote similar to this, whether that be around your dinner table at home or in different settings. The younger generation are just lazy; they don't have the work ethic that we do. Well, the next slide challenges this somewhat, with the biggest motivation of 18 to 24-year-olds, which is Gen Z, being around development. Jamir, if you could pop onto the next slide, please. So around development here. So you'll see that that's the biggest motivator for young people across this particular category, showing that they're very motivated to really develop themselves and develop their career. Remuneration and benefits didn't really surprise me here, was going to be high up on the list for the lower age category. Flexibility was lower than I personally expected. Hopefully this data might be useful for those of you that are adopting hybrid or office work models if you're hiring younger employees. And looking at the next slide, please, Jamir, of the Gen X category, the content of the role, I was less surprised about these results. The content of the role is very important. The culture of the business obviously remains super high, consistent with some of Hamish and Megan's points earlier. And again, salary and remuneration remain very high. So I think there's a few things to take away from this. On to the next slide, Jamir. This was something I added in yesterday. So I was sat reading some of my notes about this presentation, and one of my family members, a young lad called Lennox, who's age 10, from Germany, as you can see on the screen here, I asked him a few of these questions as I was just preparing this for today. And I said, what 3 jobs would you like to do? What career preferences do you have? No great surprises. He went for professional footballer or soccer player if you're from North America. An influencer, a social influencer, or a business owner. When I asked him specifically what environment would he like to work in, he said he wants a good manager, which will make his work far more fun because he has a good manager to work with. He said that his exact words were, I like a nice energy in the business, culture of the business in this survey. He said, because it's nice to work in a nice place. And he said he wants plenty of money and some benefits. And I asked him why. And he said, so I can buy a nice big house and do some really fun things in life. So maybe next time we'll do a survey on the Gen Alpha generation and see what comes up. Next slide, please, Jamir. So how do you manage someone whose years are even decades older or younger than you? How do you go about doing that? Often leaders go for consistency regardless of their generation. But a one-size-fits-all approach to managing multi-generational teams sometimes can leave boomers convinced they're being sidelined, Gen Z feeling a little bit unloved, Gen X becoming a little bit cynical, and millennials slating you on social media. Um, I thought that was kind of an interesting context. I think, Paul Redmond here, if you look him up, has some very interesting work around this topic. Said being inconsistent in leadership is the secret to leading multiple generations. So I think that's something we can all definitely learn from. Next slide, please. So I just want to touch on this, and we're not going to have time to go through this in detail. Again, we're going to do a deeper dive on this on the up and coming workshop. But there is a philosophy called Ikigai, if I pronounce that correctly, which you can use and leverage when hiring leaders, and also question how leaders can apply this within their own teams themselves, and also when they're hiring their teams. So in simple terms, Ikigai is a model that enables a person to gain a sense of purpose or a reason for being. There's lots of different translations of this, but essentially a sense of purpose within their life, which you can obviously transfer across to the career and what they do every day. There's 4 key dimensions: something you are good at, something you love to do, something that the world needs, and something that you also have to get paid for in order to. And once you combine all 4 of those things, then you've really got someone who gets up and really loves their job every day. And of course, that turns into a great environment, great culture, and ultimately great performance. So there's plenty more stuff on this that you can Google it, look it up on YouTube. And as I said, we're going to touch on it a bit more in the workshop, but I just wanted to give you a little bit of a flavor for it for now. It might come in handy when you're hiring leaders next time around. And next slide, please. So just to sum up, there's a few key points on here. But defining your requirements, not just for today, but also for tomorrow, is a very important factor here. Looking at how you can motivate different generations of people that have different motivators, also in different geographical locations. The obvious point of partnering and managing the right recruitment partner to help you onboard these people, whether it's internal or external, is very clearly very important, always has been. One key point, which I believe Hamish touched on, was, people at different levels are very good at interviewing. So being able to cut through those that are good at interviewing to those that can actually perform and lead and do the job well by introducing a very rigorous recruitment process that actually covers all the things that the 3 of us have spoken about today is incredibly important. I would also just leave on one point and say, consider ripping up the rule book and hiring leaders on a global basis in different locations. It can really offer you a lot of different benefits against, other organizations that literally hire in the same office, same city, same geographical culture and everything else. So it's something that we're seeing increasingly happen at the moment. Next slide, please. And just to wrap up, so just a reminder on the QR code here, if you haven't already, if you didn't get time to sign up earlier, please click on the QR code now with your phone and sign up for the up and coming workshop, which is towards the end of September. And as I mentioned, we've got the speakers here today. We also have James Osborne, who is the founder and CEO of the Recruitment Network, who has an awful lot of knowledge on a number of these related topics when talking about executive hiring. So very much hope to seeing you there. So I will leave you on that note, and I shall hand you all back to Clarissa.
Thank you so much, Chris, Hamish, and Megan. What a great presentation. A lot of wonderful comments in the chat and some great questions in the Q&A that we'll get to. So before we get to the Q&A, just want to again thank everyone for getting up early and staying up late with us to learn at HRCI. We're so grateful for that. We have HR professionals from all over the US who learn with us every week, but we also have HR professionals from all over the world. I'd like to recognize them today. Today we have HR professionals connecting with us from India, the Netherlands, Prague, the Philippines, Portugal, Tanzania, Ghana, Canada, Rwanda, Nigeria, Nicaragua, Jamaica, the Bahamas, Barbados, England, Dubai, Bangladesh, Nigeria, Spain, Turks and Caicos, St. Kitts, Ireland, Uganda, and Kenya. If I missed your country, please go ahead and put it in the chat so we can make sure you are acknowledged. What great speakers today. Let me start, Megan, with you. One person asked, do you find it hard to find executives with specialized engineering experience and leadership qualities? I'm going to broaden that question with technical experience and leadership qualities.
Yeah, thanks for that question. It's a very important question and one that we face, I would say, across levels in our organization. So one of the things that that is one of our biggest business challenges in the technology space is finding great talent that combines their technical capability with that promising leadership arena, I'll call it. And it's challenging because obviously if we go to engineering school or computer, if our degree is computer science, whatever it is, leadership is rarely taught in traditional education in these forums. And so then we get into the workforce and all of a sudden we're expected to have these competencies. And it's a really challenging situation for both the business and the person. And so we lead with empathy in that regard, and we invest in, or I'll call it early leadership development before people even themselves identify as leaders, if that makes sense. So we start to have sort of leadership competence built in at in the junior engineering roles for us. And we start to build future leaders in our organization through different programming and through different, even some external resources, et cetera. So happy to talk more about it, but it is a big challenge. And it remains a challenge even at the executive level. I know that's the topic of this conversation today. And so again, investing in not expecting that everybody in the world has the leadership competence that you need. And if they don't, rather than sort of vilifying them, just understanding that not everyone's going to bring what you need to the table, but rather how can you invest in them to bring them up to sort of what you need or what you're looking for in your organization from a leadership perspective.
Excellent, Megan. Thank you so much. Chris, a question for you, a two-part question. Is there any one assessment that you found to be reliable for executive hiring? And secondly, do you do the assessment before you hire them or after you hire them? Was a couple of questions in the Q&A.
Sure. I think on the assessment piece, I think it, particularly for executive hiring, I think it's very important, Clarissa, to have a number of different assessments and combine them where you're measuring cultural fit, personality fit. Megan just talked on the technical side, which depending on the exact role can be differ in terms of its importance. I would generally say as well that the industry background, in some settings is sort of being deprioritized, and it's more about the characteristics that we've spoken about on this presentation today. So looking at how, future proofing your leadership, looking at how they fit within your organization, and not necessarily the exact match to the industry or the exact technical skill set, maybe not always being so important depending on the nature of the role. So yeah, in terms of the assessment side, there's a number of tests. I do find some of the profiling in relation to cultural fit particularly interesting at the moment. That's something that we do. That's something that we insist on when we do our own executive hiring, and in fact, even our kind of mid-level hiring as well. So that seems to predict performance. And then with regards to the second part of the question, the answer I very strongly feel is both. It's incredibly important to assess people as they come in or before they come into the organization to know what that match is, and then continue to coach, mentor, develop, or assess, coach, mentor, and develop the talent across the organization, not just across leadership roles. So I think both is very much the answer. It saves you an awful lot in a number of other ways if you get that piece right.
Yeah, gotcha. Thank you so much, Chris. Hamish, when hiring for C-suite positions, you've highlighted the importance of culture fit to ensure alignment with the company's values and goals. However, there's growing emphasis on culture add, where bringing in leaders who offer new perspectives can drive innovation and adaptability, especially at the executive level. How do you balance the need for cultural cohesion with the benefits of introducing diverse leadership styles and ideas that may challenge the existing culture?
That's a great question. That's Jethro's question. Yes, I saw that on the list. That's a great question, Jethro. And I think it may come down to terminology here, actually, because I think we've got to talk about what do we mean by culture. I'm not talking about a set of values here within an all corporate values or whatever. I'm talking about really the ability to work within an organization to deliver change. So I want change, I want diversity, I want people that will come in and challenge the normal way of doing things. I have to say that because I've built a career on trying to do it. So you have to try and do that. So I think, so when I say in British Airways, it was an operationally led organization. They were not going to embrace brand management in the way that Procter & Gamble would. So, and I had to make sure that the person was capable of fighting their corner, influencing the business without having the support structure around them that maybe they had at Kellogg's, Unilever, Procter & Gamble or whatever. As I say, with the bankers, it was about helping them understand that you're not in a bank branch now, you're in a supermarket, and that environment is totally different in the way you present your products and your services and whatever. So I think what you've pulled up here is probably my terminology being wrong. I think you're absolutely right. If I talk about environment fit, that's probably a better phrase to have used. And that's what I'm really looking for, is to be able to fit within the environment. But I absolutely agree. I want the change. I want the challenge. That's why I'm bringing people in, is to bring fresh thinking and fresh challenge.
Excellent. I'm going to ask this question of all of you. I saw a couple of these similar themes in the Q&A. How many interviews should we, I was going to say subject, but that's not a nice word, should we have C-level executives go through before we can make a decision? Because I went through 40 one time, and I mean that. I got the job, and I said, if I get this job, I'm changing this. So 40 is too much, I think. What's the right number? Hamish, let's start with you.
I don't know if there's a right number. To me, it's about getting to know the person. And frankly, I would rather spend some time with them, which is not a formal interview, because people, I think something Megan says, people learn how to perform in interviews quite often. I would rather go for dinner with them, have a chat with them, go on a store. If I was in a retail environment, I'd go on a few store checks with them and just chat on the way around. And that way you get an understanding of the way they think and what they want to do. So I think it's about understanding the person, not there is a set number of interviews. And as I say, the more you can understand the person outside an interview environment by actually other kinds of engagement with them, I think you get a better picture that way.
Great. Megan, what do you think? 45?
Yeah, I couldn't.
55?
No, it's interesting. I couldn't agree more. I echo everything Hamish said. There is no right number. It absolutely depends on the executive, the role, the team that you're trying to integrate it into, and the stage of business that you're at, as I was sharing earlier. But what is critically important, and I'll highlight again, is that spending time in person piece. And if you're hiring somebody from across the world, and we've often flown people out and spent the greater part of a week with them. So we've had some formal stakeholder interviews at our headquarters, etc. But moreover, we've gone out for dinner with them. We've taken them on tours of our city. We've spent time with their families. We've invited them to our homes for dinner. And we've really gotten to know who they are as human beings above all else, because that's what matters at the end of the day. We hire people because we know they can do, we've already assessed that we know that they can do the technical business aspect, but we want to hire people we want to spend time with at the end of the day. And so that's the key factor.
Excellent. Chris?
Sure, yeah. From my side, sorry, I can't be more specific either. I don't think there's a golden number to go for. But what I would say is that I think often organizations tend to over-interview than under-interview, particularly at the, well, to your point, Clarissa, 40 interviews. So I think some would argue that that's overkill. I think, coupling to what both Hamish and Megan have just said, I think going for a shorter interview process that's more succinct, it also rubs off very well on the candidate side as well. It gives them a better impression, but really focusing on the social side of really getting to know people as individuals. So we, for example, in our organization, we always meet every new joiner for a full day before and go through the business when we're at the point of offering them a job at certain levels. So we actually just kind of, sit in a restaurant, go do something together to really get to know each other as individuals and as a team. And that seems to work really well when people are in a more relaxed setting and you can kind of get to know them a little bit more and how they might integrate with the teams as a whole. So that's just something we do. But I would say my message would be, people have a tendency to over interview to make sure they hit the mark rather than under interview. So maybe considering dropping those last 2 interviews and sticking to a more reasonable amount.
Excellent.
Sorry, Clarissa, if I could just make one last point there, just on
Please.
what said. Let's also not forget it's a two-way process. You've got to see how much do they want to spend time with you? How much do they want to understand about your organization as much as we want to find out about them?
Hamish, at number 39, I was fatigued. I was thinking, this is it. Enough.
Probably told you
Anyway,
something about the organization, though.
indeed. Hamish, Chris, Megan, what a fantastic, fantastic session. Thank you all so much for sharing your expertise with us. On behalf of all my friends and colleagues from all over the world, we are so grateful for you being with us today. Everyone, here's the recertification activity ID code on the screen, 677194. 677194. We're going to leave that up on the screen for just a few minutes. Remember, in order for us to keep doing the great work we're doing, first of all, we have to take care of ourselves. And then we can take care of others. So don't forget to keep the human in human resources. And we'll see you next week. Be well, everyone. Thank you again.